My name is Yusef Bunchy Shakur. I'm the son of Ava Joe. I'm a native of Black Detroit. Would like to welcome you to the Mama Cool Community House. More important to my neighborhood, Zone 8. I grew up on this block. My mother grew up on this block. We arrived on this block in 1952, where my grandfather bought a house down the street. So we've been here working and organizing. So it's an honor to serve in a partnership with Michigan Radio.
I'm Beanish Ahmed. I don't have quite that long history in Detroit, but I am eager to get to learn from you all and learn more about this space as we go. That's really our approach to this event and our approach to this kind of reporting. I cover criminal justice, and I'm a member of the enterprise team at Michigan Radio. And our attempt has been to report with community instead of on people who are impacted by systems. We want to be able to be humble in our understanding of not knowing everything, starting with not knowing everything about this city, not knowing everything about the criminal justice system, and the many ways that it impacts people's lives, whether they are on the inside or have loved ones or close friends and family that are on the inside. So we're really here to listen, to hear your experiences, your insights, and your ideas for change, and to be able to bring about the stories together in our reporting so that we can be better able to represent the issues tied to the criminal justice system in a way that can afford for some kind of change in the criminal justice system. So again, we're really here to listen, and we're really grateful to you all to being here, and really grateful to folks who have volunteered to share some of their experiences. And of course, grateful to Yusuf for hosting us in this beautiful space. So thank you all so much for coming out, and thank you, Yusuf, for having us.
Yep. And so just to add on to that, the purpose of is the ability to connect to the issues, and connecting to the issues, connecting to the people. Sometimes we put the issue above the people. And so the issue of related to mass incarceration, related to youth incarceration, is to see it through the eyes, through the experiences, through the pain, through the suffering of those who have lived with it, those who have wrestled with it. But more importantly, this is greater than an individual story. This is greater than an individual story. This is about a narrative. This is potentially about building a movement. This movement has been going on for decades. It's been ups and downs. But understanding, particularly from formerly incarcerated, our loved ones who have suffered and supported us, it's about naming ourselves, speaking our pain, speaking our reality, speaking in love, speaking in hope. But understanding that we have the ability to change is not as individuals, but through a collective narrative. So again, when you hear Yusef Bunchy Shakur, you may not see my mother, you may not see my father, but I'm a product of them. I'm a product of my neighborhood. My neighborhood has been gentrified. My neighborhood has been undermined, which allowed for criminality to exist in my community. So do we blame the individual or do we blame the system? That's why we're here, to answer that question.
All right. And again, really excited to hear what all of you have to say on all these issues, the many issues that Yusuf has raised. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jamie Simmons, who's going to be co-facilitating some of the dialogue that we're going to have. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Simmons. I'm the community engagement reporter for Michigan Radio. And again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope that you enjoy everything that we have to offer, and I hope that y'all enjoyed the food because it was really good.
Oh, slamming.
So as Binesh and Yusuf shared, we're here to really listen. We're here as storytellers. And as storytellers, the most important thing is hearing, and we're in the same umbrella as storytellers as our neighborhood historians, our poets, our singers, and we have so many of those in this room right now, kind of wrapped up in all one person as well, because I know a lot of y'all do a lot of things. So I'm just happy to be able to here to facilitate that process and really get this storytelling kicked off, you know? I'm waiting for Yusuf to give me some. So our first set of storytellers today, we have 5, but I'm going to break it up into 2 sets just to get the bios out of the way. But our first three storytellers are Dave Clark, Kimberly Woodson, and Nick Buckingham. Dave says he was rightfully convicted but wrongfully sentenced when he started his two life sentences on January 3rd, 1988. Through diligence and hard work, he was released in December 2018, and now he helps other returning citizens get back to society. Kimberly is the founder and director of Redeeming Kimberly. It's a nonprofit organization that heals our communities and one returning neighborhood at a time. Nick, oh, there he is. Nick is the campaign director for Michigan Liberation after spending 7 years incarcerated and catching the backlash of the stigmas that come with having a felony. Nicholas decided to focus his attention on higher education and raise his voice for criminal justice reform as a graduate of the University of Michigan School of Social Work. So thank you to all three of our first storytellers, and I welcome Dave to the stage.
My name is Dave Clark, aka Daoud. I represent Dreamer Detroit, which is a community about a mile and a half down the street on Davidson and 12th, between 12th and Woodrow Wilson. Housing. When I got out of penitentiary, I had a pocket full of money. Had no credit report, but I was literally being ripped off by landlords saying, hey, you got to give me $50 for application fee, $75 for application fee. I spent over $700 in application fee, and I was homeless. I couldn't, I ended up in a hotel. What Dream of Detroit is, it's like, work with me for 1 minute. Everybody close their eyes. I like to work with the audience. Close your eyes for 1 minute. Think about your neighborhood right now. Now vision what it could be 10 years from now. If we show love, that border house, let's fix that border house and put a family in it. Let's plant some trees and flowers in this vacant lot. Let's put a kid's playground right here. That's what Dream of Detroit is. With that vision, we have a project called Project Homecoming, which is a reentry program for prisoners coming out of prison. It's a full wrap services. We have a clinic right across the street. We have the masjid right down the street. And we help each individual coming out to get job training, housing, where nobody's trying to rip them off. That's what Dream of Detroit is. It's that dream that you only think about in your head, that you walk past that vacant lot every day, where you could buy it for $1,000, put flowers there, put a playground there, put a swing set there, put a bench there. Vision what your neighborhood could be if you only show your neighborhood some love. After being rightfully committed and wrongfully sentenced, and I say that because I never had a juvenile record, never had an adult record, worked for the city of Detroit as a paramedic. I went to prison for defending my family, my loved ones, my wife, my children. And they gave me 2 life sentences. 7 years later, 2 Detroit police officers went to prison for killing Malice Green. And they get it smacked on the wrist. 7 to 15 years and 12 to 17 years. That's how I got back. Unfair sentencing. I compared my life against their life. And it showed that I was wrongfully sentenced. I did 31 years. I fought for 31 years for this freedom. They gave me 2 life sentences. I ain't supposed to be here right now. I'm supposed to be in a jail cell somewhere, looking at a wall. But I didn't give up. And my struggles in getting out of prison and finding housing is why I do the work I do. Because prisoners come out of prison is the most discriminatory group of individuals walking the city of Detroit. They make you have a job, so you have a job. You're getting paid. but you can't find housing. I can go to any apartment complex and apply, but when I came out, I had a 0 credit rating, so I couldn't get an apartment, couldn't get a house. Nobody messed up my credit while I was incarcerated. Housing, housing, housing. Show your neighbors some love. Open that house next door to you for the returning citizens. The people come out of prison there a lot of times. We ain't y'all enemy. We the one, we have to work or we get violated and sent back to prison. We worked through the pandemic. They won't let us get on unemployment. What's the unemployment check? I ain't seen one. You know, I worked 3 jobs. Still do. Have to be at work at 9:30. Punch that clock. You know, so what Dreamy Detroit is, it's located right down there on Davidson, between 12th and Woodrow Wilson. Muslim Center is the host of it. And we trying to revitalize that area. We remodeled 13 houses, planted over 113 trees. You know, one property at a time. That's what we're doing. You know, and we had a reentry house for prisoners coming from prison. We give them a place to stay. We give them health care. We give them a job, and we're showing them love. Thank you. That's it.
I'm Kimberly Woodson. You see, in my childhood is where I first introduced my foe. This foe followed me every day of my life until I learned to let it walk past me. That wasn't easy. You see, my foe was trauma. And as a child, you aren't taught how to deal with trauma, how to process trauma, how to get over trauma. So I was a kid who repeatedly was traumatized by my uncle's abuse, by my mother being jumped on and left for dead by the man who said he loved her. The system failed me over and over and over again until I became the herder. I became the one that inflicted trauma. February 1988, my friends and I were responsible for the death of Miss Amy Black. Miss Brown. I apologize. She was 93 years old. She didn't deserve to die in a house fire. She didn't deserve for a bunch of kids who didn't know how to process trauma, reacting in the pain, reacting to their environment, trying to one-up people. She didn't deserve that. And I didn't deserve the natural life sentence that I received before I can vote the judge into office. They threw me away, but God had the key. Since my return home, I started a nonprofit. It offers wraparound service to returning neighbors like myself. Because I recognize that if we don't address the traumas that has been compounded on us and we have somehow managed to push down into us, but never fully address. And when you go to somewhere like prison at a young age, you learn some things you don't want to learn. And you do some things that you really don't want to do. But one thing they don't make you do is work on yourself. That is have to change. That's why Redeem and Kimberly offer those services. We want to welcome them back into our community. We want to heal that community that also broke us, but we broke them. Healing our community, one returning neighbor at a time. That's what we do because my community let me down. Nobody heard the cries of a young girl at night when the same man that tried to take her mother's life, when we went back to him after my mother stayed 2 years in the hospital, was the same man that would let strangers in the back door. It was only when I lashed out in pain, when I began to scream in anguish, that they locked me up. No one embraced me. No one said why or how. It was only after I came out to a community of broken people that the society has threw away and said we are undesirable. But guess what? Those are my biggest comrades. Those undesirable are my strongest people that go to fight for me. Those are the ones that I turn to when my sister got killed from domestic violence. Because she didn't learn the lesson from my mother. So her husband killed her and killed himself. The cycle was not broken. I did almost 30 years in prison, come home to lose my sister. And what is wrong with society that we are throwing our children away, but we don't hear they cry. And somehow, some way, we are always the undesirable, but nobody wants to help. Well, Redeeming Kimberly is here. We offer wraparound service to returning neighbors. We want those young ladies who are maxed out of foster care. The system say they are not mature to the age of 26, but why are they getting no support between 18 and 26? But they had no love and support from the beginning. That's why they was in foster care. Where is their help? Redeeming Kimberly is here. For those women who are afraid that nobody will hear they cry from their domestic violence situation, Redeeming Kimberly is here. I hear you. But guess what? I'm only one person. And I need help from my society, my community, to back me, to give me the tools that I need, the funds to support my community. I've given y'all chances to get it right. I got 30 years of experience to lay before, to be a servant for my community, to heal it, one returning neighbor at a time. Help me.
What up, though? I'm Nick. Woo, take y'all down memory lane real quick. 3 minutes. In 2012, I got one of the greatest joys, and that was to walk out of the prison system. Prior to walking out, I served 7 years for an act of violence that not only impacted my life, but impacted the lives of the innocent victims that was part of my carnage and my rage. It was armed robbery. Going into that prison system, I seen a lot. I seen more black men die in my lifetime while being incarcerated than I seen on the streets even after being free. I seen more corruption from prison staff. I seen more hate from my own kind black folks against other black folks. There was no rehabilitation when I was incarcerated. One of my eye-opening moments was when I was on a visit. At the time, my daughter, she was 4 years old. And it was close to my birthday, and her and her mother would come into the visiting room with tears in their eyes, and I knew something wasn't right this time. These tears wasn't tears of, Dad, I miss you, I want you to come home. It wasn't tears of, Dad, why do you keep lying to me, talking about you and jobs and all of this other stuff, we know you locked up. But this was something that was hurt, and was trauma, and it was pain. And so my 4-year-old child, she would sit right there in front of me, and she would tell me about a sexual molestation that she went through with a 16-year-old. And at that moment, all I wanted to do was be a man, be a father, be a caregiver, and hold her. But my visit was interrupted 3 times And on that third time, I was sentenced to segregation for the 90 days, and that would be the last time my daughter would see me on this side of the map. Going into segregation, eye-opening moment. I fought it out with God. I made the best friends with the devil. I hated myself and loved everything else around me. When I walked out of segregation, I found my way into the Nation of Islam. And from there, I would start to go on a trajectory where I would become a good boy within the system, do the things that's right, make my salats, my prayers, and uplift other people that was coming around me. So here it is, 2012 come around, and I'm excited. I get paroled. I'm walking out of the system like many others have done. Right there, JCS, we walk through those gates. We put on our we take off our state blues. We put on our street clothes. We go through those gates. I was one of the ones that actually kneeled down on the ground and put my crusty lips right there on the ground. I wasn't really worried if I was going to catch some type of disease in the mouth. I didn't care. I was just happy that I was out. I get to hug my family. I get to hug my mom and my daughter. Like anybody else that come out of prison, I didn't really have a goal in mind. I just kept telling people that I wanted to be successful. Somebody once asked me, why? Why just success? Because I haven't been successful at anything else. I couldn't rob people without getting away with it. I couldn't sell dope without smoking it. I couldn't sell dope without spending it on fresh gym shoes and not having the money to re-up. I couldn't steal cars without getting caught by the police. I couldn't break in my neighbor's house without getting caught by my neighbor. I wasn't successful at anything. I even tried to go to school, but ended up dropping out by the 11th grade because I thought money was more important than school. So yes, when I came home, my number one goal was to be successful. I got a job at Family Dollar, and it was it was the second greatest joy in my life. Because I would go from making pennies on a dollar to making $9 an hour where I would get paid every single week. So if you add up that money, my paychecks was around $200, maybe $350, something that I can go and buy a pair of Air Force Ones, a pair of jeans, and also have a good time in the streets with my homies. I will work at this job for 3 weeks. Remind you that when I did the interview, I spoke about my felony conviction and all the good things that I actually did in prison. I even brought a binder with all of the success stories that I had while I was in prison, and they gave me the job. But 3 weeks later, a regional manager comes. He was a jolly, fat white man. He did not like me. And he looked me square in my eyes and he told me that I was not supposed to be working here. And I responded back that this company is a felony-friendly company. And at that moment, I would learn that it was only to the discretion of the employer what they mean by felony-friendly. They fired me right there on the spot. According to my parole officer, all she wanted was that money. I didn't have nothing to give to her but to tell her that I was fired from my first job. So like many others that come out of the system, understanding how the felony stigma works, no resources, lack of family contact, I picked the bag back up and I started to sell weed. Within that first week of selling weed, I had an ounce. It was broken down, all grams, bagged up with a scale. And I left it on my mother's couch by mistake as I went into Southfield. Shouldn't have been carrying it to Southfield, no way. And I got a call hours later from my mother that my parole officer stopped by the house. And I told her she didn't have to say no more. I knew exactly what that meant. Here it is, 90 days after I come home from prison. I have to turn myself back in with a new case and a parole violation. After 90 days of doing a 7-year stint, I have to go right back into the Michigan Department of Corrections. I have to put back on those blues, back on those orange shorts, those state shoes. I have to go and eat that state food all over again. I have to go and take that cold shower where I have to continually push that button every 3 minutes just so that a drop of water could come onto my skin. Back to using that big bar of green soap that I never understood the ingredients in, but it's strong enough to make the darkest piece of clothing as white as the snow that will fall in the North Pole. I was back in this environment again. When I came back into this environment, I seen people that I was just on the prison yard with, and I started to ask questions of why are you here? What happened? We was just together 90 days ago when I was expecting for these folks to tell me that they caught a new bit, that they murdered somebody, they robbed somebody, they got caught selling dope. It was all the reverse. I heard people say that they violated parole because they didn't have a job, because they did not have housing, because they did not have the resources to be successful while navigating their new life in the community. So I learned the new word while I was in there, and it was a word called recidivism. That close to half of the number of people that are coming out of prison are going to return right back into the same conditions that they were paroled from because the lack of resources in our community. And now I am one of those statistics. But there's another success story that comes from this. See, before I paroled out of prison, I did a smart thing and enrolled into school. It was illegal, but I did it because everything else I'd done was illegal, and I did it anyway. I was somehow able to get financial aid, get classes, and the only downfall was that there was too much time in between me coming home and classes starting up. So once they say that the idle mind is the devil's playground, the devil had an opportunity to play around in my mind and got me hemmed back up, put right back into the Michigan Department of Corrections. They said 45. They gave me 47 days, but on that 47th day, I will walk out of the Michigan Department of Corrections right here in Detroit and walk into my very first college classroom. It would be the first day that I would actually start my journey as a social worker. It would be the first day when I would come across a Black woman who was not afraid of me, my stature, or my slang. Asked me, why was I late coming into class? And I told her, because I just got out of prison. I have no shoestrings. I smell like a locker room. My hair is overgrown. I'm light-skinned. I'm pretty, and I like to look good. And I don't look like that right now. And that's why I am late. And she took me right in her office, and she told me, one, do not ever take psychology. The second thing she did was she gave me a pencil that was about this long and 3 pieces of paper. And I grabbed the pencil, and this was a foreign object because in prison, our pencils was rubber, and they was as small as my pinky. And again, this Black woman was not afraid of me holding this pencil, sitting in this office all by ourselves, and her one advice was never to take psychology. Since that moment, I have been grinding really hard in the field of social work and community organizing, just building infrastructure for formerly incarcerated folks and people who are impacted by the criminal legal system. I have started various organizations here in the city of Detroit. I have various wins. I have campaigns that I have developed right out of my basement that are garnishing major wins for this state. I will often say that prison did not change me. And today I'm going to say it again, that prison did not change me. It was the conditions of the men that was in there, the elders that have been held down for 30 and 40 years that got my butt together. And when I went back in that second time, all of that wisdom that my elders gave me, I seen it with my third eye, and I'm bringing it to my community to organize, to rejuvenate, and to make sure that each one of us who are living our lives through the stigma are not being bombarded in our communities. Thank
you. Wow, talk about a tough act to follow. Yeah. Also, shout out to Nick for wearing a Black Radical Healing t-shirt from the School of Social Work. And I'm pretty sure you were talking about Deja Price. Shout out to her. I knew it. So moving on to our next 2 speakers, we will have Yusuf come back up here in a minute. And we will also have Ashley Golden join us. Ashley is the Nation Outside Program Director, social worker, survivor, and fierce reform advocate for underprivileged communities. Just 3 years from her release from the Department of Corrections in 2010, Ashley graduated with her bachelor's degree in psychology. Then went to get her MSW, another social worker, where she works toward her doctorate as well as at USC. And Ashley was recently sworn in as Genesee County Deputy Sheriff. So really great to have you, and we'll kick you off, Ashley.
Good evening. Time heals all, they say, but this is actually flawed logic. The fact of the matter is that the impact of trauma knows no numerical threshold for the behaviors in which it manifests. And time heals nothing without action. And so when we imprison millions of broken spirits, young and old, year after year, without providing them any help or humanity or resources, we can expect them to get out and repeat the cycle. And this makes sense, because when I put my dishes in the sink and I come back the next day, not only are they still dirty, but they're harder to clean. And when I keep driving and I ignore that little engine light, eventually my car breaks down. And just because I put it in a garage for the winter doesn't mean in spring I can hop in and start driving. I need service. And so when we wait to address the abuse, neglect, and witnessing of violence found prevalent amongst 90% of those trapped in our criminal punishment system, we only perpetuate that pain and desperation that caused those poor outcomes in the first place. You see, time doesn't actually heal anything in itself. It merely opens a window of opportunity for action. But for decades, as public health and safety administrators, we've been missing it. You see, my brothers and sisters inside, we're not convicts. We're not inmates. We're not offenders. We're not perpetrators. They aren't delinquents. They are like any and every other vulnerable and voiceless population in human services. They are our clients. They are consumers and stakeholders of our public health and justice system. And guess what? When they overcome, they become our colleagues and our allies. I would know, because I'm one of the few who've been able to navigate the over 44,000 additional obstacles needed to succeed after having been incarcerated. But if you think it's the prison system that turned my life around, boy, you be sadly mistaken. You see, the system didn't care that my executive functioning had been delayed from being a biracially adopted, substance addicted baby who found out my sister was my mother at 12 years old. It didn't care that my gender nonconformity often led me to being thrown out in the street in the middle of the night after fights with my Irish Catholic grandmother, or that my uncomfortability with my school peers and teachers often led me to skip class with older male friends who I identified more with, but who ended up taking advantage of me. And when I went missing for 3 days, and the system thought that my troubled ass had just run away, no one asked had I been held captive and exploited, and I was too ashamed to tell anyone. That is, until 3 expulsions from school and a robbery case later, I tried to explain all of this as I was processing it for the first time in front of Judge Morrow. And I never forget, before he slammed that gavel down to put my broken ass in the garage, he made sure to first publicly chastise me for what he reduced to simple promiscuity. I spent 20,000 hours inside the scariest place I had ever been. How can we heal our nation by treating its most damaged citizens like animals? I remember the guards came and kicked my door in the middle of the night, boom, just to scare me. Medical care took months. I watched the only girl willing to be my spades partner physically wither away and die waiting. My first week, a captain came in to open my shower curtain to watch me shower, and for some odd reason, I was forced to squeeze goose feces in my bare hands off the yard or forego my phone and fresh air privileges. So no, it wasn't prison that changed me. It was my sheer will to change it from a system that would kick people while they're clearly already down to one that will build us all back up. Thank you.
I see you, Ashley. Okay. What up, though? Between my mother and me. You see, I'm a product of a teenage love affair. My father was 17, my mother was 15. And if it was left up to my grandmother, I would have been an aborted baby. But my mother was so determined. She had so much grit that she changed my grandmother's mind. And changing my grandmother's mind, that she had one request. Can we name that boy Hope? Hope like hell he don't turn out like his daddy. Between my mother and me, I would see gender violence firsthand from the men that she dated, from the society that stigmatized her, that abused her. So by the age of 24, she would have 3 children by 2 other men, as if it was her fault that she was raising the children by herself. You see, between my mother and me, I would get kicked out of school as early as in kindergarten for fighting, for being disruptive, for being labeled, as they say, a troubled youth. But no one ever asked me, no one ever came and engaged me. More importantly, no one ever came and tried to fill the blanks in my mother's life to be able to provide the other extra things that we all may need. You see, between my mother and me, by the age of 13, I would co-found a gang in the city of Detroit, not even knowing what that's the hell I did. I'm just hanging with my homeboys. We gang banging and trying to protect ourselves. And years later, when I look back and say, damn, we actually co-founded a gang. You see, between my mother and me, by the age of 15, she made me a ward of the state. Not because she believed in the system, because she had no one backing her. There was no one there that she can go knock on their door and say, can you help me save my son from possibly dying, or facing a life sentence? I only can imagine as a mother wrestling with that decision, the pain that she went through every night. Because when the phone rang and I wasn't there, wondering, would that be the call? Can you come and identify this body? Or can you come and he's down at the precinct? You see, between my mother and me, no matter what I've ever been through, she was always there. Always in my corner, whether right or wrong. You know, when we shot up the church right up on the boulevard, I didn't do it, but I was there. And I remember them giving us a bond, and my mother bailed me out. And the next day they snatched the bond and raised it. She was still there, still fighting, still protect, because that's what a mother does. You see, between my mother and me, when I began more deeply in the streets and I was running with hyenas, here's this lion that's coming out in these streets, coming out in these alleys, fighting these hyenas who trying to take advantage of her son because he's looking for something that he don't understand is deeper than what he can realize. Between my mother and me, when I went to Maxi training school and we had a chance to sit down and I tell her, I'm sorry for all the hurt that I caused you. And she tell me, I'm sorry for whatever I caused you. The opportunity to talk and bond and see the worth of each other, despite the pain, despite the oppression, despite the trauma. Between my mother and me, I would go to prison for a crime I didn't do, and it broke her heart. It broke her heart because she knew I wasn't an angel, but I didn't do that. And she saw, as she saw her mother, and she saw in her father, the remembrance of what racism does to Black bodies. And to see it now, and more importantly, to see it through the lens of a Black person, or by the hands of another Black person. You see, the officer on the case had told my mother years ago, I'm going to take pride in sending your son to prison. You see, between my mother and me in prison, I would meet my father. But I know it went something like this prior to me going in, prior to me meeting my father, that my mother had a conversation with God. And that conversation she had with God was, I need you to put your hands on my boy. I need you to protect him. But again, my mother is so thorough. I'm pretty sure it went something like this, that she showed up in my father's dream and told him, Negro, you ain't done your part, but you gonna do it now. You better show up now, because now I'm gonna hunt your ass every day of your life. I believe it went something like that. and having the opportunity to meet him made me love my mother more, made me appreciate my mother more. To the point when it was time to see the parole board and they kept giving me flops. And anybody here in this room know what that experience feels like, right? And you telling your mother, you telling your father, you telling your hey, maybe next year. Right, I ain't do nothing. Maybe next year. And your mother's saying, what? Why? Why? And at that moment, after that third flop, I can't lose hope because my mother's losing hope. Not in me, because again, this is what the system does. It tears the family apart. It breaks us down. But I remain hopeful because my mother remained hopeful for me when I didn't know what hope was. So at the end of my journey in that system, I walked out with exhibiting what Black transformation is. See, many of us get an opportunity to break our parents' heart, to take them through hell, but we don't get a chance to show them what heaven is. And I was fortunate and I was blessed for 21 years to show my mother what heaven is. Show my mother that I loved her, that she saw her son on the other side. That when I left, that she didn't have to worry like, well, someone was going to kill my son. That is the greatest joy as a child that I can experience, that I appreciate. See, between my mother and me, I am who I am because of my mother. They say I'm a success story, but I'm successful because Ava Joe is successful of breaking the shackles of being oppressed as a Black woman, being oppressed as a Black mother, being oppressed because of patriarchal society that undermined her, that gave me the courage to fight up and live as a revolutionary between my mother and I. Thank you.
I want to say that's a wrap because that would be a beautiful ending. But thank you all so much for sharing your all stories with us and sharing that in such an intimate space. I feel like this house that Yusuf has created just brings that powerful energy out of us and makes us feel one in this space. So I'm really grateful to be here with you all. The next part of our programming is kind of thinking about how media plays a part in the narrative and how we can widen this, and how Michigan Radio here, and we have so many of the team members in the room, Michigan Radio folks, two over there, one over there, me. Yeah, and we just really want to have an open room conversation. Again, like we want everyone, you, Lindsay, y'all to participate in this conversation, to think about how can media service this community better, and how can we showcase what you think is important and center within the stories that we do cover. So yeah, if everyone's willing to participate, and I know Yusuf has some questions too. Great.
Part of this section is the impact, the intersectionality, right? We heard a lot of pain, we heard a lot of hope, we heard a lot of joy, right? And that's the heart of intersectionality. And connecting, again, once we connect those stories, that becomes a narrative, right? They say those are closer to the problem, closer to the solution. That is a profound statement, but to make it even profound, when we connect our identity of who we are, mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, and those other individuals in our society. This is what this part is, right? To be able to partner with someone who's willing to help us convey that story about who we are through a narrative, and not just the sensationalized bullshit that we get. So let's get into it. Let's talk about it, and also keep in mind we're not going to solve everything tonight. Tonight is a beginning to get to that solution that we all can help create what that looks like through an authentic partnership.
For sure. So the first question we open up to the room is, what's your take on the media? How do you feel media has covered this community?
Anybody else want to go next? No. What year was this again? Say that number. How many prisons?
4. Marquette, Elmar, Jackson, and MTU. In 1994, it was 50 prisons. As they closed the factories, they opened up the prisons. As they closed the mental health hospitals, they opened up the prison doors. So not only we became prisoners in the system, we became social workers, psychiatrists, medical doctors, and everything else. You get a guy to be your bunkie, he's jumping off the bed, hitting his head on the floor. So, without funding for programs after prison, it's a recycle. You just recycling people back and forth to prison. Most people who do 20 years or more in prison is not going back. We are the ones here got these programs helping others. We're the ones telling our stories every chance we get. So the media don't help us, they hurt us. You know, as long as they keep opening more and more prisons, that's not helping people.
Now I add to that, to the point of the stigma that comes with it, right? And then like some of those who spoke before, for myself, we take accountability in what we've done. Many of us, the narrative, like everyone act like we didn't do anything wrong, is not true. That is a small minority of us, right? But because of how the media tells the story, again, unfortunately, if any one of us out here in this room who've been home for a number of years done have accolades up the ass, right? Was go out and jaywalk. The first thing they're going to go and talk about what we did 20 years ago, what we did 30 years ago. They're going to forget that Yusuf Bunches Shakur just graduated from the University of Michigan, School of Social Work, where they ass couldn't even get accepted into, right? This is the unfairness in the telling of the story and telling, again, don't sensationalize. And so media has the opportunity to balance that out. And that balance also helps to be able to shape narratives, to be able to shape policies, to be able to influence individuals who are contributing to these things, particularly police, how they see us. You know, you get a chance. There's a new series I call 61st Street, and it shows where a brother accidentally killed an officer get killed, and they take a picture of him like he's so upset. What happened? And he's just like yell, but they zero on that picture to make him like a monster, and that's what the media does. We need to unravel that.
Add something to that kind of from a media and cultural aspect, especially with our returning citizens, returning neighbors. Too often times when returning citizens and returning neighbors come home, being a school teacher myself and a father, the stories that are purveyed are the stories of the toughness, how solid a guy was in jail. I think even media, including myself being media, one of the things including returning citizens, really talk about the hardships. That's one of the things. Too many times the glory stories, guys come home and returning citizens come home and talk about a lot of those glory stories. So I think it doesn't put the right amount of fear in our youth. It put a badge of honor fear versus an actual fear of going there, of actually a fear of being in that place. And I can speak to that, being a former juvenile delinquent myself. The fear, I actually heard the trauma stories like you guys talk about here today. Too often, returning citizens don't talk about the trauma. They talk about more of the strength and the heart and the gangs and the street life, and, the stuff that you hear about in our rap and R&B and, saying hip hop culture. But the way you guys spoke, the way you all opened up today, and I see NPR is here, and different people. Everyone is media. This is a social media world now. So each and every person here has the value of 10, as we know in radio. So we know even on social media, that's transposed to even more numbers. So again, I think if we start to tell this narrative, like you guys are talking about here, tell that narrative of trauma, the root organics of trauma and where that leads, and not the sensationalizing the stories and the specific crimes that got people in that place. But let's talk about the trauma. I think that'll help. But great thing. I mean, I appreciate all you guys opening up. It's inspirational, it's learning, and it's anecdotal at the same time, man. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. I saw someone over there.
Thank you. I think social media saved us. No, I'm just playing. But if you look in a way, if you talk about social media, and I think the people behind the camera is what really saved us, if that's to be taken literally, because so many murders by the police took place without, ever being recorded. So much evidence was planted on even returning citizens, trying to get them back. So just revolutions have taken place across the world because of the power of social media. So I think with everything going on with police brutality and police killings, I think in a way, us having our phones in our hands, that social media has had a great impact on bringing this story to the forefront, bringing stories like the injustice to the forefront as well. So in a way, I do feel that social media has helped our cause. But in the same breath, you can't say that without mentioning the role that media plays in not only the culture, the glorification of the violence and what takes place in the communities, but then also the perception of, especially living in a criminal justice system where you are judged by your peers. The public opinion of your peers matters, and every time you turn on the TV or the radio, you see a Muslim being classified as a terrorist, a black person as a thug or a robber, or whatever the words are that they use. So I think in many ways the media has a negative impact, but I think it's the new generation, the new people in the media, behind the social media that are also changing this narrative.
Absolutely. Thank you. And of course, as a Black woman standing up here, I get the sense of the stories that kind of paint us, and that has to be strong. It's something that historically, since slavery, a lot of us have kind of upheld that we have to be strong, we have to tell the good stories, and society has definitely mirrored that in a lot of what the media shows. This is a strong Black woman story coming out of prison. This is a strong overcoming on nothing can take them down, when we are just as vulnerable and as need as much help as any community there is. And as we think about how media has gotten it wrong in the past, I would love to have the conversation of what could it do now to make it better, to build that trust, to create the stories that help and tell the truth, the real depiction, not the stories that motivate or make folks, because I think we've all heard that too. Some of the youth say, oh, I could do that. I could do a bid. People sometimes talk about jail like it's not prison. And like, it's important to tell the truth, the whole truth, and all of the experiences, not the glory, school of social work, but the whole spectrum. And I would love to hear some of folks in the room of how do we get it right as media outlets.
Media, I'm thinking of a poet. If I'm a poet, I will be responsible for word usage. Media is responsible for word usage. Let's look at the word jail and prison. They normally use it simultaneously. And some of us may say, well, that's insignificant. It's just a word, jail and prison. It's not. One place a pretrial detainee is held, a person that is innocent until proven guilty. The other place is a place where a person has been found guilty, convicted, and sentenced. The use of those words simultaneously or interchangeably is irresponsible. It's totally irresponsible. That other person is still a member of your community, unsanctioned by any jury, by any member of his or her peers. But the media has already usurped the jury's authority. And in doing so, they have legitimized the consequences that goes on in our nation county jails. County jails, the conditions are reportedly And we all witness factually worse than that in a state prison. How is that? How do we accept that? That a person that hasn't been tried and convicted, haven't been tried and convicted, held pre-trial, is treated worse than the person that is in a state or federal prison that has been condemned to a sentence. The person that is in the prison, if given the opportunity to go back to the county jail for any kind of evidentiary hearings or retrials, they find it a horrific idea to go back. They find it, the state prisoner finds it horrific. You want me to go back to the county jail? Can my attorney go? The idea is let my attorney go. Let him or her appear before the court, but me, never. This is an example of the media's irresponsibility with words.
Yeah, I agree, and that's one of my biggest pet peeves is when the media refers to us as ex-convicts or former inmate. Like, I'm about to get my doctoral degree next year. I'm not an ex-convict. I'm a deputy sheriff. No, I'm just playing. But seriously, no, you know that's a joke. You know I don't even care about that bad. But it goes back to Yusuf's point. I've been out for 13 years now, and if I was to jaywalk and they was going to, they're not going to talk about the student organization I started at USC. They're not going to talk about my 8-year career in child welfare. They're going to talk about that unarmed robbery I did when I was a kid. You know, and I take full responsibility for that, but the media helps perpetuate that stigma and that cliche and that stereotype through the use of what kind of words they use to refer to us to, right? That's number one. The other thing I think that the media can do is partner with orgs like ours. We have a lot of stuff going on that needs visibility, and the majority of people in society don't agree that people should be held not able to get a job or a house for something that they did 40 years ago, but they don't know that that's still happening. I was making $50K and sleeping on my grandma's floor with a 700 credit score because no one would approve me for a lease. That's the crazy stuff that the media needs to, you spoke to that a little bit, but those are the crazy stories that need to be highlighted, right? To get people aware of what's going on. And we know when the media influence is coming, right? Like anytime there's a campaign season about to kick off, you know that you're about to hear the crime rate is getting high, right? Because that's the Republicans, that's their tagline. That's how they get people scared. They're like, oh, we need to vote for that crazy Detroit police chief that didn't get enough signatures. We need him in there because the crime rate, oh Lord, they stole the Christmas tree from Fox. Oh Lord, the crime rate is going up. And so you see these stories in the media picking up steam, right? Well, just as many stories as there are that highlight those issues, they need to be countered with about 10 more stories about how crazy the system is devastating our families and communities, right? And I think that's one way. But I'm the director of Nation Outside. We're a grassroots organization entirely led by the justice impacted. We go after policies. We don't do service delivery. We go after policy because we can't change the system one person at a time. It's too many of us. It's 3 million of us in Michigan with a criminal history. And we only got $5 to help. You know what I'm saying? We can't help all 3 million people. So we have to change policies in order to do that. And we need partners to help us get those stories out there. Right now, we're trying to get Medicaid for reentry services because there's no funding for reentry. The only reentry services available to people are run by the MDOC, and we know how worried they are about our well-being, right? And the faith-based community, right? And there's no standardized reentry services. Mental health and substance abuse funding is funding reentry services, but guess what? Reentry is much more than mental health and substance use. That's not going to help anyone get a job, right? And so partnering with the media to help to co-conspire with us to get those counter narratives out there, because you know that the tough on crime ones are coming. And that's my 2 cents. I gotta go to class. Thank you.
And just add to that, you think about everybody that spoke in the room, particularly of the population from the incarcerated, right? Always related to the movie X-Men, Charles Xavier, et cetera, right? That team of individuals, those of us who are not afraid, who embrace our calling, so to speak, right? But we forget about the thousands of other mutants who are still wrestling with that, who are still being locked out of this society, who may not have the articulation that heard in this room, wrestling with trauma. Like those are the ones that we got to get to. Those are the ones we got to unearth and tell. Like they're not necessarily trying to beat the door down as a social justice warrior, et cetera. So they just want to be the mother, be the father. I don't even want to jaywalk because that's how afraid I am to going back. And that's part of that balance of telling the story, but also again, more important than telling the story, but telling a narrative. I think that we're all responsible. And I think the more we take on the responsibility as human beings, because the reality, that person can be your friend or that person can be your enemy. It depends on how you relate to it and deal with that situation. Because at the end of the day, circumstances can create a criminal or it can create a friend.
And an important thing that Ashley brought up before I had to run off the class is the thinking of engagement, co-conspiring together. What does engagement look like, or what should it look like with media? How should we show up and build power together?
That's a good question. Somebody speaking? Oh, yeah, I think Ash has said it right. Like media often, I think the media loves a good success prison story, and when those things come out, that's when like we get bombarded by the media. So for us, like with Michigan Liberation, the moment we say Black Mama's Bell out, like the media just, oh, this is such a beautiful program. Or what's some of the other efforts? The media come out, we be like, man, this is some garbage, whatever, y'all. I think one, like in community organizer, we do something called listening session. So like tonight would have been a listening session, right? And I think having an opportunity where media can actually come out and not make it into a media thing, but actually there to listen. No, otherwise. Otherwise. But yeah, like through listening sessions and having that collaborative space with the media. I think a lot of times for me, like 95% of the time, the media is tokenizing our lives, right? And when we're not being tokenized, it's like, okay, the media is gonna say X, Y, and Z about us. So yeah, listening sessions is one. And not just, I feel like sometimes like the media hunts us, right? Like we're just prey that's walking around Michigan. It's like, oh shit, here come the media. There go a good formerly incarcerated person right there. But then they'll turn around and be like, wait a minute, this person over there did 30 years. So let's go over there and get this person. Wait a minute, they did 40 years plus a flop. And so like we see how the media reacts to different people. So it's like a lot of tokenization that goes on with it. I think another thing that media can do is it has to be equal, right? I'm not saying like we need to, but we need to see white crime. And the reason I say that we need to see white crime is because 9 times out of 10, when you go home, channel 2, it's about to be a lot of black crime on there, right? Even if you go into some of the whiter areas like Ann Arbor or Lansing, you still see black crime. And so it gives our younger generation this idea, right, that black people are the most dangerous and that to be safe, you have to be gentrified or live across 8 Mile or live in the suburbs. But when you go into Michigan Department of Corrections, and I know we hear this statistic all the time that there's more black people that's locked up. Statistically, it's almost equal, right? You actually see more white folks that's incarcerated in Michigan Department of Corrections than black folks. But it's black folks that the moment we drop a pin, right, we're stigmatized by it. The media is responsible for the racial barrier, the invisible racial barrier here in Detroit, which is 8 Mile. Nobody will ever have this fear of crossing 8 Mile if the media never depicted Detroit to be the most dangerous place in the world, and the most safest place is, in Oakland County or Macomb, right? I would never know that there was a sign that says when you enter Detroit, enter at your own risk, because the media decided to take a picture of it and put it across all of their platforms. Not me, not my homeboys that's gangbangers, right? Not none of my dope dealing homies. Like, yo, check this out. We got it from the media. So I think that's a few things that we can do to like build that collaborative space. I would like to see more of these listening sessions happen where maybe it's ran by us and the media, you all are filling the seats. And it's not a recorded moment, but a moment to where, we can really share our stories and see the human side of us, and not just, the formerly incarcerated or the pain and everything else. And then the very last thing I'm gonna say, when we tell stories of trauma, that is traumatic. All right. When we tell our stories of trauma, that is traumatic. That is a trauma that is going back onto us. So the young man that was just here that like tell these stories of trauma to put the fear in our children, you have to remember that we're peeling off band-aids and reliving our own trauma. When I tell that story of armed robbery, I am putting myself back in that fear, my hand back on that gun, seeing those people's eyes, how they were looking I can't get rid of that. That goes nowhere. That lives within me. So when we tell these stories, it's not to be exploited to put fear in the next person. These stories are to be told to talk about the conditions of our community and the conditions of the systems of oppression that many of us have been forced to live into. So it's a pleasure to get up and talk about the trauma, but remember that some of us talked about some deep trauma, maybe cried up there. Some of us going to go home and self-medicate. I am, right? Some of us might go home and get drunk. Some of us might contemplate suicide because we talked about a 3-minute segment of our trauma. So I just want the media to remember that as you all are hunting, right, for the most traumatic story, that it is trauma for us to tell that story over and over and over and over and over. So we have to get that part right too. All right, y'all.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think it's the children. Was there anyone else that had anything to add about what engagement?
Hi, everybody. I do communicate. I'm the communications director at Michigan Liberation, and so I see both sides. I think one of the things that that we've done at Michigan Liberation that was successful was like working with media and allowing when we allow the people in our organization to tell a story, almost like an op-ed, or where we were more engaged, and we also got a chance to see the final product. That's one of the I think issues that sometimes we'll do these amazing stories or interviews or whatever, and then next thing you know, when it's printed or when it's on air, it's like, wow. So, maybe a 10-minute interview turns into like Nick said, 3 minutes, and it's like all the stuff that's used is nothing that it was like stuff that we really even didn't want to be printed or aired. So I think it's more effective when we're, of course, doing listening sessions, but then also maybe we work on the project together. I had 2 ladies that told an amazing story about love, loving somebody behind bars, and they not only wrote the story, they got a chance to edit it, and that was powerful. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to you writing it or him, they wrote it, and I helped. I was like the mediator and everything, and it was just a nice, beautiful finished product, and their name was on it too. You know what I mean? So I think it's like Nick said, the listening sessions are great, but then coming together and doing a project together. So therefore, it's not just your name on it, but maybe his name, her name on it, and it coming together, and therefore everybody gets a piece of the pie.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right.
The story that I actually wanted to tell tonight is a mixture of reform and abolition. I done gave these stories about who I am, how I committed a crime, and the number of years I spent in prison. That done wore out. Okay. I have now, been to the University of Michigan School of Social Work and graduated with a master's degree. I have now took and used my experience to take and try to enrich my life. It's not about the storytelling, it's about ideas now that hopefully will bring about policy change and some abolition. One of the concerns I have, and I got 4 things, and I want to make them real concise. One idea I have is reentry. And my position about reentry is that reentry must be considered before entering the prison system. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It shouldn't be an afterthought. No one put someone like we're gonna go to war and we don't have an idea what we're gonna do after the war. Okay? And this is what we're doing. We said we had a war on drugs and we sent thousands of African American men and women into the system and disrupted a whole community without any idea what the end game would be. My position is that reentry should begin before a person enter into the carceral system. And that would take and make people begin to contemplate the seriousness of whether or not to send a person to prison or deal with some type of alternatives. The second is the Michigan Department of Corrections policy and practices of disrupting prisoners' usage of savings and bank accounts is actually creating poverty in the state. Some members of the public may not know that the Department of Correction has a policy that's probably been in effect for more than a few decades now. And that is that they had encouraged prisoners to close their bank and savings account. It makes it easy for them to arbitrarily and capriciously take their money when they have a dispute with them about that money, or if that money go over a certain mark and to make them pay rent. But what it does is that that person no longer has his or her money to take and save for his first apartment, to save for his first used car, to get to and from a potential job. They don't have the money to take and save to buy a suit, to take and go look for a job and to look professional while doing so. That policy creates and perpetuates poverty in the state of Michigan. The third is prison gerrymandering is the inflation of poverty, in the predominantly African-American communities. These populations are this is from the false census. We are allowing local communities that have a large prison population to claim those prisoners as theirs. So they claim the resources that actually belong to another community for at least a decade. That's a decade of robbery, of thievery. So when the person returned from prison, the effect of that is that, census money determines where hospitals are built. So if people think that this is just a matter of cuddling prisoners, remember that when there's no community no hospital in your community. Remember that when there's no school in your community, because that's what census dollars, the loss of census dollars mean. Remember when there's no damn supermarket in your community. That's what happens with the census dollars. When there's no housing, that's what happened with your census dollars. And fourth, repurposing county jails. Sheriffs now prerogative is to take and house. That's where their preoccupation is housing people in the county jail and or transferring them to prisons. That's the preoccupation typically of a sheriff. But when you consider the millions of people in this nation on a daily basis, upwards of 1,700,000 people that goes through county jails nationally. The numbers have fluctuated during this pandemic. It has went down, thankful. But when you consider that number, and all you are is preoccupied with either locking them up, housing them in your county jail, or sending them to the state prison, remember, consider what you're doing to the economy. Consider how you are disrupting that local economy with that large number of people. We haven't begun to consider that. We haven't begun to consider what do that mean, that large number of people in and out of a county jail. Let me give you an example of how a brief stay in a county jail can disrupt your life. Remember, if a U.S. veteran is arrested for a domestic concern, taken into a county jail, imagine he or she is released within 30 minutes, it already have consequences. Their medical benefits is already cut off. Already cut off. 30 minutes stay in the county jail, 10 minutes stay in the county jail. Their medical benefits is cut off. And guess who represent the largest damn population in America's county jails? Guess who represent the largest population of recidivism? American veterans. So the next time you tell one of them, thank you for your service, remember that. Thank you.
I just had one thing to add to what he was just saying. In 1990, what's called the Upper Peninsula, they was vying for a separate state from the state of Michigan. They had their state name called the Superior State. The capital was going to be Mackinac Island. You know the story. But they stopped it because they said, okay, we'll send all our prisoners back down to the Lower Peninsula. And so they cut a deal with the state of Michigan. You keep sending your prisoners up here so we can keep building our economy, because literally it's over 10,000 brothers and sisters from Detroit up in the UP. And the UP getting their tax dollars. Detroit is not. So just think about that. The next time somebody have to travel up in the UP and they got to get a hotel to stay overnight, they got to buy gas, food. It's helping their economy. Bring our brothers and sisters back down here. Stop shipping them up north.
Thank you so much. So we've gone 19 minutes over, y'all, which is fine. Hopefully by Yusuf. But I did just want to open the space for everyone. If there's anything else that you wanted to say, things that you think the media should cover more, or just some more ideas around what we can do to engage the community better. This community, Detroit, just overall, we're trying to do better. This is a second event that we've done with community members and really trying to listen and provide resources and build better relationships and heal past relationships for some folks in Detroit who might feel slighted by media or not included into the stories that we're trying to convey and depict more. I see you with your hand up, but yeah, I definitely want to open that up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to say, there's this podcast called Ear Hustle. Mm-hmm. It's dope. If anybody y'all do podcasts, listen to Ear Hustle. Mm-hmm. It got a lot of seasons now. So my pitch is I would like to see NPR try to put together a Michigan Ear Hustle where it can actually go inside of these institutions and have conversations with incarcerated individuals, because they all have a story, and the story is deeper than their number and their crime. So I don't know who runs that, but that's the pitch. I'm gonna go back and edit it. So
look, I love a good pitch, so keep those coming. Anyone else? And also for Michigan Radio folk, my school of social work friend over there, if you have anything to add as well.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And I hope as we wrap this event up, we can still socialize a little bit. Make sure you grab your food. I don't know if there's leftovers upstairs. But again, thank you all so much for joining us tonight and experiencing this with us and sharing your stories. And hopefully we can continue to cultivate these spaces. And shout out to Yusuf for helping us do this. And shout out to our tech team that set up the mics and the stream for YouTube for people who couldn't be here because of COVID. So thank you. Oh. Thank you so much.